trying to draw parallels between that and aliens infringing upon our lives. Because, yeah, there's like a lot of different factions in this. The Oscars were last night.
You know, the Oscars are the Oscars, right?
Uh-huh.
But after the Oscars, we watched Abbott Elementary.
That's true. We did watch Abbott Elementary.
My first real full episode.
Uh-huh. I have seen all the episodes. It was interesting to watch it with... we were watching it with friends of the pod, and they have each also had...
And two enemies of the pod. Two other cats that I was having an allergic reaction to.
Yeah, technically there are 3 cats, but one of them was...
One of them was chill.
But yeah, each of the 4 of us have different experiences with Abbott Elementary. One of us has seen none of it. So it was interesting. I think especially I'm someone who's very interested in the concept of like the post-Super Bowl episode of TV. This year it was Tracker, but it has previously been used to launch big news shows or spotlight shows. Like there was the Grey's Anatomy episode where everyone's favorite character from Friday Night Lights had a bomb in his chest. And yeah,
Is that true?
Yeah, it is.
Isn't
true.
Friday Night Lights about a high school football
See,
team?
I meant the I was kind of joking because the actor from Friday Night Lights is the guy who's in the Grey's Anatomy episode.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clear eyes, full hearts. Don't let that bomb blow up. So yeah, the girls who know what I just did there. But yeah, so I feel like the post Oscars episode is like kind of a smaller version of the post Super Bowl episode. Like the Super Bowl gets way more viewers than the Oscars. So it's not as big, but still, they had Bradley Cooper in the Abbott Elementary episode, and they were definitely like trying to make an episode that would appeal to new viewers as well, I think.
You think? Would you say the plot was regular, like normal? Is that one of the normal plots?
Well, I remember, I think it was you who was like, "There's no B plot," and I think usually there is a B plot and a C plot, but this one was more. I think they're trying to tell one story, and I think that it was kind of about like the legacy of the show or the school and like the person that the school is named after, and I think it was kind of trying to get people like what is the idea of the school? Why is it so important to these characters? Janine specifically, of course, and she's the one who gets really into it. So yeah, I think it did a good job of that. I think there were definitely like tie-ins between the Oscars and Abbott Elementary because both of them were kind of...
Because Bradley Cooper got shat on both.
I mean that, but also I think both of them, they were talking about representation. Like Abbott Elementary talked about, the first black teacher in Philly was at Abbott. And then meanwhile, you have at the Oscars, you have Killers of the Flower Moon. We have Lily Gladstone, who's the first Indigenous actor to be nominated. She didn't win. Emma Stone beat her. A lot of tweets happened because of that, but I think in both of these we're kind of getting an analysis of how different parts of America grapple with these like histories of like white supremacy, how those are counteracted. And I think like in the Oscars, there's like an added bit of irony of like, these are all rich people, like, and a lot of the Oscar voters are trying to seem like they're counteracting these things. But then like, if you look at the history of white people winning, it's like, yikes, but we still watch.
We talked about a couple of things here, but I want to zoom in on something in Abbott Elementary.
Yeah.
In that episode, we were informed that Willard R. Abbott was elementary school is going to become a historic building in Philadelphia. And so they learn that the original abbot was a little bit of a racist, but then we meet one of his descendants who's this philanthropic, charismatic guy that does all this environmentalism stuff. And then he gets on the podium to accept to kind of give like an acceptance speech of the plaque, I guess. And then we learn one thing about him.
That he's a flat earther.
And I think that is a great way to start this conversation.
Yeah, great way to segue into the comic that we read.
Yeah, we read Saucer Country.
That's right.
By Paul Cornell and Ryan Kelly.
Yeah, this is a 14-volume comic. AP is going to give the full plot rundown, but if you want the quick couple sentences, it's about aliens, it's about politics in America, it's about conspiracies.
It's about a tattooed man with a muscular body.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're into any of that.
Yeah, but tell us more about this story.
Yeah, we're gonna go full enchilada. So just if you're not ready for that heat, step out. Some queso frescos in the fridge. Eat some of that. So Saucer Country, released by Vertigo, or the publisher's Vertigo Comics.
Uno, dos, tres, catorce. Do you understand that reference?
No.
Vertigo by U2. People love to make fun of that lyric. But yeah.
You bring up U2 too much. Is a required listening for this podcast U2? Should I learn who Bono is?
It's not required listening. It's just like whenever I hear Vertigo, I always think of that.
What's that guy? The Fade?
The Edge.
The Edge.
Yeah.
So our main character is on the edge of her New Mexico governorship, and she is thinking of running for president. This is Governor Arcadia Alvarado. Wow, shame on me. And this comic series starts with these two characters, Arcadia and her ex-husband Michael, being found in a deserted road, and with the implication that there was a little bit of a alien abduction that happened.
Yeah. It's interesting the way it starts, and you also get like this image of the professor and two naked bodies with little things covering them, and you're like, damn, what's going on here? But it all comes together.
Yeah. And so this kind of starts the presidential race part of Arcadia's career. We learned some other characters. We learned about Chloe Sanders, this Republican hotshot strategist that's ready to make this, in her words, divorced immigrant, childless brown woman into the first president of her kind.
Yeah, I was honestly expecting the comic to do like give her own subplot, but she was kind of just there as like a supporting character.
She was like the ghoul of the bunch, but like the lovable ghoul.
Definitely.
And we also meet Harry, the chief of staff for Arcadia.
He was definitely a West Wing character.
I have some thoughts about that man.
Yeah.
Mostly positive, but I'll get into it later.
Yeah, I think Leo is the West Wing analog.
I don't know who Leo is.
Uh-huh.
The West Wing is also not a show I've ever seen. I've never
Uh-huh.
seen The Sopranos either.
Well, you should watch The Sopranos. You don't need to watch West Wing.
Okay, okay. I will. Yeah, I would love to spend some time at Bada Bing with Tony Soprano,
Yeah.
and we also get to meet Professor Kidd, a mythology studies Harvard professor that is in some hot water because he is a true believer.
Yeah, and he's seeing some things, in particular, two beings who are talking to him and helping him make important decisions in his life.
When I first saw that, I was like, okay, all right. These two are called the Pioneer 10 couple.
Hmm.
Later on, we were told explicitly the reference, which is these golden disc that was where two a feminine and a masculine figure were etched onto this golden plate and was launched out on Voyager, and so it's out in space somewhere right now.
Yeah, I feel like that's an example of. You can tell there's like been a lot of research that went into this comic. Like it kind of covers a lot of ground in terms of like what's happened in space through history, what conspiracies there have been, etc.
This is definitely a kind of like a conspiracy, specifically UFO and alien conspiracy, greatest hits.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were hitting every big one, even back to the original encounter with a UFO, which happened in Washington State. This pilot saw this thing, this flying crescent thing.
Yeah, there's like a lot of scenes of people explaining the history of conspiracies or discussing them in order to figure out like what's happening to the characters.
Yeah, and do you have any like? We talked a little bit of this, but do you have any like history with that kind of conspiratorial thought or thinking?
Not really. I think it's never really appealed to me. I enjoy media that like engages with that. Like I remember there's been definitely like a few documentaries that I've watched and it's like it's fun to hear about like all the different angles that people have used. But I've never been someone who's like gone down a deep rabbit hole and gotten obsessed.
Okay. Yeah. Things like, well, Twin Peaks, right?
Uh-huh.
Or The X-Files. That's kind of like your...
Yeah, TV, like like actual television shows. Those are what I get obsessed with. But it's and of course, like on Twin Peaks, you could say there's conspiracies in it. But I was never really the type that like, is like theorizing about like what's going on. I liked reading, like Lost theories and stuff like that. You had
Lost like the show.
Yeah, like you had Doc Jensen on Entertainment Weekly. When I was catching up on that show before the final season, he wrote these really long pieces where he kind of like tried to really dig into all the references that were happening in a Lost episode and try to use that to predict what's going to happen. And those are fun, but like ultimately, like I forgot most of what I read.
Was Lost the first show where that kind of like online obsessive, what I guess, the prediction of shows and episodes that are to come? Did it start with Lost?
I would say, I mean, Twin Peaks came before it, X-Files came before it, so and there's probably other ones too, but I would say Lost synthesized it.
That's when the masses were like, you know what? I could put on a hat.
Uh-huh.
I could be the smoking guy.
Yeah, I think maybe it's like for my generation. Lost definitely wasn't the first, but it was a very important one for me.
I just thought about that. It's just it really feels like every show now there's like a contingency of people online trying to predict what's going to happen on the next episode, and I'm just like, just show it to me.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
I mean, that type of thinking like Westworld is what it makes me think of, where people were able to predict like in episode 2 a bunch of the big twists of the season, and then it made the rest of the season pretty boring because we're like, we know that this old guy is the same person as this young guy in a different timeline. And eventually, Westworld, like, it kind of deteriorated and eventually got canceled before it could have a proper ending. So yeah, I feel like that type of storytelling, like, it has to have like something behind it, like Lost does. Like, I am a big fan of Lost.
Okay. All right. So, like, let me give you an idea of my like relationship with conspiracism. And that is, I just find it fun. For the longest time, I just found it fun. Like, growing up, I like, I don't know, I like the idea of aliens existing. I thought that was pretty chill. But as I got older and I started seeing things about how the alien narrative is useful to conceal certain thoughts. Like, I think about David Duke. I think it's David Duke, this British conspiracist who thought the rich and the powerful were reptilians, this alien race called reptilians, and they would put on a mask and act like the rulers of this world. And he said that explicitly about like Queen Elizabeth. And I just thought, I thought it was fun, but in reality, like now as an older person, I'm approaching my 80s, so like it's I've been around for a bit. I think that I can't have fun in the conspiracies playground anymore, because it all just feels like dog whistles and anti-Semitism and like bigotry and all of this bullshit.
Yeah, it's been taken over, by QAnon and people who have RFK Jr. theories and all this stuff that we don't even want to deal with.
Yeah, mainly because it's bullshit. And
Yeah.
we're talking about something serious here, a comic book. And so the governor with her team starts a two-prong journey of becoming president and learning what happened on that night. Did she get abducted by aliens or not? One of the things that we are met with in the beginning is this feeling of something happened, something might have not happened. Chloe Sanders, the Republican, Frank Luntz of this people started to weave a narrative that Michael was an abuser, and she was gonna use kind of that night as a further example of it. Except Arcadia doesn't buy into it, because Michael is also going through the same thing, and they're divorced, but they still love each other, and you see that throughout the comic book run. And this is where we first see the real introduction of sexual violence as a theme in this comic book.
Yeah, and I think we should give a content warning that we are going to talk a little bit about the depiction of sexual violence in this comic book. So yeah, it's like you kind of get both from Michael and the governor, them coming to terms with what happened to them that night, and they kind of both come to terms with the fact that they believe that they've been anally probed. And a doctor asks the governor if she's had anal sex recently, and then the fact that the doctor is able to make that connection without her
see the physical proof.
Yeah, that makes her think that it's confirmed. And for a while, they're some of her aides are like, "Oh, did Michael do this to you?" But eventually, she kind of gets like, it feels like she's getting like more visions of like what has happened, and she's like, no, Michael didn't do this to me, aliens did this to me.
Yeah, yeah. As Harry, and I like this characterization of Harry as someone who is skeptical of the alien side of this story, but completely supportive on the victim side of the story. Like there is no moment, there's no hesitation within his mind to be supportive, and I really like that.
Yeah. But I will say that I think that the way this is used kind of as a plot device, I was not a fan of. And, it kind of underlined for me that the author is a man, because I really felt that, like, there wasn't enough care, I think, in just like the way that this was presented to us and kind of just thrown into the narrative. We've there's been a lot of discussions about like sexual violence in media and uh, like I remember maybe like 10 years ago, if kind of during Game of Thrones when that was on the air, it felt like there was sexual violence on TV all the time, and a lot of it felt gratuitous and like they were just trying to like shock the viewer. And this isn't, I would say, as bad as that. Like it's not like it goes into. It's not like we have to like sit with it for like pages upon pages. But I do still think that this was an example of the comic book coming up short.
Yeah, there's multiple flashbacks of like both Arcadia and Michael and some other people being kind of being stripped down in this like medical alien section of the craft, and there's like these moments where kind of like a frustration within Arcadia and Michael are being represented. Arcadia at one point barricading her front door, and Michael jumping deep into alcohol as a coping mechanism. And to hit on what you said here, I felt the exact same way all the way up to chapter or volume 8, where I was just like, it feels like this is just being these two topics of alien abduction and sexual violence are just being mixed for what felt like no real reason other than maybe that is just the take that he was giving.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like part of the genre. Like, I mean, unfortunately, the first thing it makes me think of is like South Park, because I think that was like a part of like one of the first episodes. Um, but yeah, definitely not my favorite part. Um, but yeah, well, what about Volume 8? Like, changed your thoughts on that?
In volume 8, there's Michael is giving out his kind of like perspective on what happened in the UFO craft, and he says the lines, "Everyone thinks the alien probe is funny." He confronts this idea that this absurd and wild situation just gets joked about callously. And then when we are brought back into reality, Sanders, the Republican strategist, kind of throws a barb at Michael about the exact same situation, about being probed, about being taken. And although that is not the pinnacle of this theme in the comic book, that was the first time where it really felt like there was actually some commentary here. A commentary on how everyday language kind of can bring up these negative experiences in somebody. The whole day can be normal, and then this one thing can happen, and then you're brought back into it. And then you might be normal for the rest of the time. But that is when I started to click in with the idea that even though that this is about an alien abduction, there's this theme here. It is not, at the end of the day, it is not a callous humor that you can find in many other comic books. What it is a janky way of approaching this topic in the most absurd way possible. And going back to who Harry is, and who Professor Kidd is also in this, and those are just two characters that constantly provide comfort and understanding to both Arcadia and Michael. Even though that the situation, by way of popular narratives, is seen as absurd, they still, within the text, believe and are supportive. And I like that. The themes are difficult, but I like that there is just a heart to these characters and their willingness to show support to each other.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of empathy between them, and that was good. And yeah, I'm thinking about what you said about language, because the language of like Alien is definitely used in multiple ways to convey different things. Yeah, because basically one of the main platforms that the governor is running on is immigration, and she's talking about, she comes from a family of undocumented immigrants, and she's pushing for people who are considered aliens to just be Americans. And meanwhile, you're having this plot about aliens from outer space. So, what did you think about how the comic kind of intertwined those?
I'll Arcadia Arcadia is woke, and she is all about bringing the people that are undocumented into the system. And the idea of mixing the language of aliens, extraterrestrials, and aliens to the nation is pretty common. And like the first Man in Black, that's how it starts. It starts with Tommy Lee Jones stopping a van out in the desert, and then knocking on the back of it, opening it up, and then you see a bunch of brown people. And this is a common understanding that if you come here illegally, you might get stopped by the feds and so on and so on. But it's undercut by him. He's only interested in the actual alien within that group, the extraterrestrial within that group. And we see that pop in and out a lot. This idea of federal powers being interested in what is here that shouldn't be here. And seeing the extraterrestrial alien immigrant is a little overdone, but it's like the time when we were recording, like the State of the Union was just been done by Joe Biden, and he like called a person twice, a criminal, someone who did a crime. They called this person an illegal, and reading this, I'm confronted with the grossness of reality.
Yeah, I kind of feel like a lot of the politics in the comic feel wish fulfillment-y. I mean, it makes me think of the West Wing again, where I feel like the immigration policy that she is supporting is something that like no current Democrat running for president would ever support.
Truly.
Yeah. And this makes me think about like my other issue, which, if you know me, is going to be something I always bring up, is I do think that there isn't enough of a class analysis in this. Like there is a part where they talk about like, well, it's usually poor people who get into these conspiracies, and then she's like, are you talking about are you conflating poor people with Mexican people? Because governor's talking to the Republican, and so there is like a little bit of that, but at the same time, I feel like the authors are probably pretty lib. Although also there is the part where there's like someone explaining to someone about like aliens getting involved in extraterrestrials getting involved in politics, and they're like, yeah, for some reason, the only thing they don't get involved in is unions.
I did, yeah, yeah. The going, if you were to take Arcadia as an actual politician, she only says, "Hey, people should be welcomed from anywhere," and that does feel leaps and bounds away from any politician's saying right now in 2024, and yeah, this internal belief that there are these powers interfering in things except unions, hilarious. I thought that was a little bit of a like score one for the union back home.
Definitely. Yeah. And there's definitely this idea of like radio shows that are talking about how the government is infringing upon our lives and trying to draw parallels between that and aliens infringing upon our lives. Because yeah, there's like a lot of different factions in this comic book, which I liked. A lot of different groups of people who have their own beliefs that are like trying to influence what's happening.
Yeah, one of them being the Man in Black, maybe, but like definitely some sort of apparatus of the federal government. In so many of these panels, you constantly see security staff in a black suit and a white shirt, a black tie, sunglasses, which always kind of work as a reminder that someone's always watching. You don't know if they're for you or against you, but someone's always watching.
Yeah, and oftentimes, a character will be talking to someone, and then in a panel, they'll be talking to extraterrestrials, and then it'll switch back, and they're like, oh, "Shit! Like, what just happened?"
I thought that was a good example of how you can if you've ever dealt with anything traumatic, you could just have a normal day, and then eventually, I don't know, a very small thing just whips you out of reality. And in the case of these characters, being in the middle of so many different interested parties, one of them being like this aerospace company called Brady Corporation and their secret society called the Bluebirds. And then you have, of course, the actual aliens that maybe exist. And then you have also other self-interested parties like Dr. Glass, who is the regression therapist. Regression therapy being a quack science. It's not real. Very common in alien narratives also.
Yeah, so basically, he's the guy who's using hypnosis on everyone. I did find it interesting that after we saw him put Michael under hypnosis and get Michael to talk about his experience with aliens, we got the governor doing the same thing, except this time she's lying about what she's seeing under hypnosis to make him think that, oh, she's actually normal.
Yeah, at a certain point, Dr. Glass says, "You're being a coward. You're not confronting what actually happened," which is telling of his motives, and it's also in the actual comic book, the way that that fake story is juxtaposed with the internal thoughts of Arcadia. I like that as a way of just showing how savvy she is. This is the type of comic book where our hero always wins.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that we had talked about before recording was this idea that uh, the government at this point in our life is okay with being like, yeah, aliens exist. And, like, we as leftists view it as them trying to distract us from all the atrocities that are happening in Palestine.
I I have thought about this.
Yeah.
I don't know if I shared this with you, but I my personal theory on why there's all this quote unquote disclosure, and disclosure is a topic about aliens being confirmed to exist by the government, and there's been this movement for disclosure for 40 years now, and my theory on that is that it's easier to talk about something that doesn't exist, aliens, than it is to talk about the things that do exist, the wealth inequality, the massive military spending, the wars being waged, all that stuff. Way easier than, passing a law that could get roads built.
Yeah. And definitely in this comic book, there's the question of like, how much does the government know about this? How much is the government trying to cover up what's happening? And of course, like, our protagonist is trying to become the president. And part of the reason why is so that she can find out more, because she knows that she'll get more information once she becomes the president. And then you have the current president, who some people think is a later lizard alien himself. And you have an interesting phone call between him and her near the end, where he's like, they don't let you do anything. And then it's like, who is they? Is it aliens? Is it the government? Is it the American people?
It could be any of that. This is where the like space that conspiracism allows for you to fill in the blank. There's no directionality to the they. The they can literally be anyone you want or dislike.
Yeah, and I think this comic book also allows you to kind of map your own conspiracies onto this, because we have so many characters talking about what they believe, like what they've seen, or what they've gotten passed down from someone else who has seen a lot of things. And so it's almost like it allows you to affirm your fringe beliefs. Well, if all these things could be true, my theory could be true too.
Yeah, there's this atomization of experiences, and then there's the internal characters like Professor Kidd trying to find the meaning between each individualized experience, and how there is some daylight in between all those and how there isn't. But they're all treated in a way where, or at least Kidd, believes in some of it and believes wholeheartedly that others are not real, especially the ones that are very tropey. But that conspiracy space that's being given here, I think, plays directly into kind of the liberal politics of the comic book. There's a quote here that I'd like you to read.
People love the word conspiracy. People love the idea of someone they can't vote for being in charge. Then the shittiness of the world isn't their fault. If I win now, it says the vote still means something. And just like that, the conspiracy running the world looks impossible. I send it running into the same category as flying saucers. That's where I want that decadent shit.
What do you think of that?
Well, I like how they did a reference to, in Just Like That, the Sex and the City show before it happened. So that was cool. But yeah, it's definitely very electoralism, like, which, this comic book, I feel like that it if you vote for this person, I don't know. What do you think about it?
It feels like it wants to just say, you have to do it.
individualism.
It truly, like, at the level, it's just atomization. It is just, as she says, like, people love the idea of someone they can't vote for being in charge. And, like, that's already the case. You know? I mean, that's called the Supreme Court. That's called just living in here, living in the 21st century. There is this internal desire of the comic book to say, hey, people fall into this, but this is also meaningful. But also, the masses are like dogs and they get, shuttled from here to there depending on what their master wants.
Yeah, I think it's definitely telling that we don't really get the voters' perspective in all of this. The only characters, like in the political part, are like her team and like her opponents and stuff like that.
Yeah. All the people voice is always just panels of people cheering on.
Yeah, like the one person, like the only people who kind of we get to hear their voice from the crowd are people who have had experience with extraterrestrials, who want to ask a question of her opponent, who also had some encounter with an alien.
Yeah. And it just feels like all of this, like deep down, is this feeling that this is your fault in a way. You can believe in conspiracies and be checked out, or you can vote for the wrong person and still be checked out. Or you could vote for me, the one person that can solve everything, which we know is never the case.
Yeah, if we want to start getting into the end of the story, she wins. She's going to become the next president. And it kind of ends there. Like she's about to get sworn in. They're talking about like how are we going to deal with all these gray men? And then it's like, well, the American people chose me, so now that's what I'm going to focus on.
And in that kind of final, very Pollyannic ending, you see these flashes of characters that we've met, and one of them being Miss Hedges, who has this kind of a small monologue about how people like the governor are the right people to get into power because they can change things, because they want to change things.
Very Obama-esque.
Very. And I actually think this comic book is a little bit of a negotiation with the story of the 2008 election. This feeling of there being real change coming about, having a black president that understood the difficulties of growing up in America as a non-rich person, And we know now, in hindsight, that never really came out. And I think, as this writer deeply believes in the electoral system, that you just need the right people in the right place and things will happen. And like, we know that's not the case. There are a million different points that need to be covered.
Yeah, definitely you can tell that it was written before the Trump era, before the Biden era. So yeah, I mean, I do think it's interesting to kind of go back to read things that came out during the Obama era. And I think, yeah, it makes sense that I'm getting so many West Wing vibes, Parks and Rec vibes from this. But sorry, Nomi, you're either gonna go for the chords or or something, and then you're gonna start getting got. But yeah, I mean, I think that this comic book, it definitely has a very thin look at like politics and how I think I remember you also like talking about AOC and like and often thought of like Kamala Harris when reading this.
Yeah, just the idea that all you need is representation, and then the rainbow comes down.
I mean, there are like moments when they're doing like debate prep where she's like trying to say she's trying to like talk about her immigration platform, and they're like, oh, the the small town America person's not gonna like that. And when she actually like says what she wants to say during the debate, like her aides are looking at their phones and they're like, well, America's hating this. Everyone's calling her shrill.
Yeah, there is a shout out of Twitter and in this, but the things that were being noted as shrill, like I have two of them right here. One of them is in the debate. She gives a rebuttal. Prisons as universities of crime, where thanks to penal culture, that's been unchanged for decades. Which, like, do people that go to prison become a certain way that makes it more difficult to enter civilian life? And yes, but is that do they get educated? Like, this is such 90s framing of what crime is like and what prison is like, and attached with a certain sense of reformism of like a penal culture, which is true. Like, I mean, yeah, we're all over criminalized here.
Yeah, so I think it just goes back to maybe a white guy who wrote for Doctor Who shouldn't be the person who makes this particular comic, but
it's just so middle of the road. It's so like not taking a position other than it's not reactionary or conservative. Like another one, the governor there's an assassination attempt on her and her security, and two of the security die. She, in the debate, says, I feel kind of qualified to speak about gun control and taking just a handful of automatic weapons off the streets, and then it ends. Mm-hmm. She's giving a rebuttal to another Democratic candidate, and that's all she says.
Yeah, I think it's like it transitions to a different panel. It's like, oh no, something else is happening. I mean, I think that they wanted to kind of create this idea that she's this progressive person that, like, if you're reading it and you're a Democrat, like, you're going to agree with her. But I think the idea of like Democrats versus Republicans, that's like the main thing that's happening in politics these days. It definitely feels very pre-2016.
So much. Yeah, it's a little thin.
Yeah. I will say, though, I still enjoyed reading the comic book, and I think part of it is that I don't read comic books very often. Like if my queer book club is doing a comic book, then of course I'll read it. And I read manga back in the day, but it's nice to kind of get back to some comics. So I'm really glad that we pick this.
Yeah. And this is Vertigo, the imprint of DC Comics, which deals with like adult themes or whatever. I'm not entirely sure what demographic should be reading this, but if you're like an adult, yeah, you'll find it a little amusing here and there, and it's an enjoyable read of just comic book as any comic book goes.
Yeah, the hallucinations that kid is having are two naked people. So, and you see that right away. And yeah, we didn't talk too much about like what those actually are, which I think was kind of an interesting twist at the end, where they're just people. They're actors who have put something in his ear so that he thinks he sees mystical beings.
Yeah, and actually, I wanna talk a little bit more of this. So that's the comic book side of it. If you're interested in that, go read it. You know, there's a lot of things we didn't talk about, but that story really reminds me of what conspiracism used to be and what it is now. Back in the day, the idea that someone could put a voice in your head was seen as what it is, quackery, like actual full on impossible technology. But now, post 2016, we know what it is, what a lot of people believe in, which is this. A lot of people do believe that there is technology that can just beam your a voice into your head.
Yeah, kind of like how we're beaming a voice into your head right now.
Yeah, except better. We're so much better. And yeah, conspiracism back in the day used to be what I nostalgically call a one issue conspiracism. There's people that used to believe in aliens, or 9/11 was this or was that, or that there was secret bases, or there was these helicopters that were just part of surveillance structures. Now we're living in a world where there is a Unitarian vision of conspiracy. And this comic book actually has that a lot. This comic book wants to present a world where so many different things are connected in the conspiracy that almost everything is connected to the conspiracy. Let me read you some of the stuff that I noticed that I would describe as kind of like single issue conspiracism versus what we have now, the Unitarian. Which one of them is the book of Ezekiel, an apocryphal book of the Bible. Then there's the fairies. Then there's mowing devils, and there's crop circles, and then there's triangular UFOs that weren't seen too often in the past, but got popular after
X-Files.
the X-Files. Yeah. Then there is like named people like Barney and Betty Hill, who were the first abductees. Then there's like Roswell. Then there's the show V. There's this planet called Serpo that has an exchange program with the U.S. military as a sleepaway camp, I guess. There's Men in Black. There's all of these different things. There's these alien race called the Venusians that are supposed to be hot. That's the only way that can be described, because that's the depth of that story. And I don't like it.
Why not?
It feels like a flattening of things. One of the things that we talk about in this podcast is sincerity. And I think one of those things is that, like, sincerity, you could like one thing sincerely, and that one thing can have connections to other things, but it doesn't have to be connected to everything. And I think this desire of conspiratorial thought has just grown and grown so much that anything and everything can be engulfed to explain whatever narrative the individual conspiracist wants, and most of the time that includes just bigotry. And I just
Yeah, I understand the wanting to find something that explains everything. And there is something that explains everything. It's called socialism. But because most people aren't socialists, I shouldn't say most people. Since many people are not socialists, they will look for other ways to explain everything. And of course, I remember when Trump was president, there was like the QAnon theories about how like he's already secretly arrested all of his political enemies and the media is just trying to cover it up. And whenever anything happened that would seem to disprove that, the QAnon theory would evolve to encompass that. So I think it's almost like people need everything to be explained, because if it can't be, then it just means that we live in a shitty capitalistic society that's slowly killing us.
Yeah, I wrote it down as what is happening now with this Unitarian thought is what no materialism does to a motherfucker.
Definitely.
Because, yeah, people want explanations. And sometimes hearing the explanation that, like, your boss's boss, your landlord, and senator are all kind of, like, interested in you being poor, it just feels too small to describe anything and everything that's shitty is happening in your life.
Yeah, and because this idea of the American dream has been so ingrained in us, where everyone has the opportunity to achieve what they want, and it's the land of freedom.
And that is literally what the governor, Arcadia Alvarado, was saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's the linchpin of her bolstering political belief.
Yeah. And then when people aren't able to do that, well, something else has to explain why my life sucks. And yeah, sometimes you get into conspiracy theories because of it.
And as someone who has just like a nostalgia for that kind of single issue conspiracism, and is a Marxist, like, it's actually like it used to be fun, but now it's just sad. That's why I don't like seeing these like people searching for disclosure or being happy that the government releases this UFO video or document. And because at the end of the day, like, what it is probably just some malfunction or some tech that's being developed, or some other real explanation that doesn't involve little gray aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we have to accept as humans is that we're not going to have all the answers like before we die, which sucks. But I think that's why sci-fi can be so fun, is that we can engage with these ideas without necessarily losing our minds to it.
So I want to pose you this question. You, as someone who has no real like connection to this part of the world, like what is your first? Have you run into someone who kind of thinks this way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I haven't really run into someone who's like been deep into it. I definitely know people who are like, yeah, I believe in aliens, but it's not something that they talk about too much, or seems to be like something that really anchors their life.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, what is your emotional reaction to like hearing that kind of conspiracy?
Honestly, mostly amusement. Like, because I feel like stuff like aliens. Like, I'm reminded of the fact that in the last season of Survivor, of course, it had to come up. They talk about who believes aliens created the pyramids.
Wait, and the players were discussing
Players,
this?
yes. And it kind of became a thing of like, if you say yes or no, is that gonna make people think you're weird, or is it gonna make people think like, oh, you're the one person who doesn't believe in it? You must be like a boring person. I should vote you out.
Oh my god, that screams of Milgram compliance. That's what happened?
I mean, honestly, it was mostly just like a fun scene to show you like how the characters interact with each other. So it didn't become a major thing, but
But it just popped up.
yeah.
It just pops up like as someone who has like some knowledge of this, it is infuriating how often these thoughts pop up in normal day-to-day life.
Yeah, and I feel like I've gotten to the point where I don't really get mad about it. Like I think it's mostly harmless. And I think there are enough things that the government probably isn't explaining to us that it's probably not the worst thing in the world for people to believe in these types of things. So yeah, I'm mostly like, oh, that's interesting. I guess I just learned a little bit more about you.
I see. I feel like I haven't ran into someone like this in a while, but if someone sincerely talked to me about how they believe ancient alien theory is real and, aliens built the pyramids, I don't think of them as a kooky person. I just think of them as a racist.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, definitely the Ancient Aliens TV show, that was like a major racism factory.
Yeah, you're telling me. I've seen a lot of those episodes, and let me tell you, now in the hindsight of a 79-year-old, like I think that is like it's taxing. It's taxing seeing it. Even I mean, we saw it yesterday in the Abbott Elementary episode.
Bringing things full circle. Yeah. Well, the good thing is that they were able to make sure that guy didn't represent the school. So at least we're able to deplatform some of these flat earther types. Yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, it is interesting to think about. I mean, I hate to bring up Trump, but he was the guy who believed in some weird conspiracy theories, and he became president. And then he tried to like push those conspiracy theories onto his supporters to the extent where they didn't believe that he had actually lost the election. So yeah, it's like a lot of this stuff does have an impact that can be really corrosive.
Absolutely, and I think that's I I just see conspiracism as a lever now that anyone in power can willingly pull as a get out of jail free card, as a I don't have anything else to say other than support me card. And you don't you don't pull a lever and get a card. What am I saying? um, I just see it as this thing that can be played so you don't take accountability, you don't actually stand for anything. All you do is just sit there pretty, collecting a paycheck, getting recognition, and then just fucking off. And that is what I can't get away from. It so regularly just gets pulled out. Even, another real world example is Katie Porter just lost the primary for the senatorship of California, the one that Dianne Feinstein relinquished upon her death. And like she's saying, hey, it was rigged. It was this primary was rigged. Rigged how? Rigged in which way? Like none of that matters because all she truly believed and wanted to that senatorship, and the easiest way to, or the least problematic, the least materialistic, and the most accessible lever she can pull to gain sympathy or cast judgment or provide or even save face is to say there's a conspiracy here. And I it's so I struggle seeing that everywhere.
Yeah, if we're gonna have conspiracies, I would much rather have it be about extraterrestrials than some dumb election being rigged. Like, I think if there's anyone who's uh, doing some behind the scenes stuff, it's probably making it so that Nomi is going to secretly kill us in our sleep, especially you. And, she's really making you sneeze today.
Okay, and with that, now that we know who really pulls the strings in the universe, a cat.
Nomi! I'm shaking my fist and you can't see it. Nomi's right next to me on the couch, by the way. She's sleeping peacefully.
Thank you for listening. There are links in the bio for you to read more about Saucer Country. And please follow us.
Beam us up on our Instagram, Dove Weather, DOVEWHETHER.
We also just released a Spotify playlist of kind of like fun little songs to listen to while picnicking.
Ooh.
Spring's coming up.
Spring, interesting.
So give that a listen. It's called Lemonade Supernova.
Lemonade Supernova.
You can find that on our website at doveweather.com.
Yeah, and you can subscribe on any of your platforms. Give us 5 stars. Give us a good little review. And we'll be seeing you soon.
Nano.
See you later. Bye.